Hi, it's Jane.
And Mike, I'm Jane's dad. That's my claim to fame.
We're from Earth Care Farm. We're here in Charlestown, Rhode Island in the USA. And we're going to talk about compost, how to make compost is going to be the focus. But we wanted to talk about a little bit about first why we make compost. And I just wanted to say I'm so blessed to be here after Poppy's been running the farm for the last 44 years. And I get to come here after the land has just been treated with such respect and compost added to these lush fields every year. And it's really just such a blessing to get to work in soil that's been treated in that way. So thanks, Poppy. And that's what we want to get to in the world, right?
Yeah,
it's just getting to where every single generation the soil gets better.
Yeah, you can make heaven on earth and live the dream.
So that's what we want to teach you how to do. It's create heaven on earth, you know? So we're going to make some compost today, and we'll show you what we do. So we're going to go for a little tour. I'll take you on the tour, and Poppy here, Mike will meet us at the end.
All right.
We'll see you soon. Here at our farm, we make compost at a large scale so that we have plenty for our farm and enough to provide with our community and the further community as well. But this is kind of how we start. We start with a pile of carbon materials. Some people call it browns that we like to just have on stock on hand. And we found that the more diverse the ingredients going into your compost, the more diverse the life at the end of your compost is going to be. So it'll be just full teeming with life, which is what you really want. We want to add that microbial life back into our soil. So each thing comes with its own unique kind of microorganism imprint. So what we have here is our pile. We have wood chips, leaves, there's bedding. We actually get bedding from Roger Williams Zoo. It's a zoo, local zoo here. And there's sawdust and that's about it. Coffee bean chaff, some tea leaf. All those brown things that really absorb odors is what you want to have plenty of on hand. And you can make a compost just with those things, but we like to go for a really nutrient-dense compost. We also add the more stinky nitrogenous materials, and we're going to show you how we do that as we walk the farm this way. So we've just left the carbon staging area where we keep all our carbon materials, and now we're at our mixing area. And what you'll see is we've made almost like a bowl, this we call it our pad of carbon, with about a foot of carbon material on the bottom and a little border of, it's about 2.5, 3 feet tall of carbon around. And what's going to happen here is later today we have some fish coming, fish scraps. The truck's going to back up and dump right onto that area so that any of that juice that's going to come with that fish is going to absorb into this carbon area, and we can then add a bunch more of our wood chips and leaves on top, mix it up, and turn it into the pile. And so what I just want to say about scale is you can do this at any scale. We're doing this at a large scale with tractor trailer trucks, but you can do this with your 5-gallon bucket at home, making sure you have a little area of carbon, dump in your 5-gallon bucket of flower trimmings, and then cover it with more material, and you're doing the same thing. It's basically at any scale you can scale this up. The other thing I want to note is that if you are a little bit bigger scale, make sure that the water, when you're thinking about water runoff, your site is engineered properly. It's sort of hard to see here, but the entire site is engineered using gravel to help the water to flow. If it's coming from this nitrogen-rich area, it's flowing into our 2 retention ponds. And if it's flowing from just the driveway, where it's not a lot of nitrogen, it can flow into our pastures, where we have 9 acres of pasture grass that surround our compost facility that we have raised cattle on. So it's just a nice little, just think about where your water's going from your site. Just a side note too, we do have our electricity needs are powered from these solar panels. Thinking about your energy footprint is a really just good thing to do for the earth and good all around. So thinking about our footprint is always part of it. So next we're going to move to, this is our mixing area, we're going to move to our thermophilic composting stage, which is pretty exciting. Our compost gets hot. And it's freezing cold today. So. Here we are at the thermophilic stage of composting. This is just a fancy word for hot composting, where the thermophilic bacteria, microorganisms, thrive when it's hot. what's happened is you just saw we had that mixing area. We mixed up our material. This was on Friday. Today's Monday. We find that 3 days after mixing, bulking up, putting it onto the pile, 3 days after that happens is when the temperatures really start to rise, because you've given the perfect habitat to those microorganisms at that initial stage. They've been mixed, so they have air, they need oxygen, they have moisture just from the materials brought in. You might have to add moisture if you have a very dry area. And then they have the carbon to nitrogen ratio that they're craving, which we specify at 30 to 1, 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And that's going to depend, there's charts that you could look up on what materials are, what their portion of carbon to nitrogen is. You get a sense of it, kind of like making bread dough by the texture after a little while. But that's what you're aiming for, 30 to 1, which with fish and the browns that we have ends up being 6 scoops of our browns material to 1 scoop of the fish material. Just as a kind of something to help you gauge what that is. But now you'll see this is 3 days after this has been mixed and piled up here. And our temperatures we're in America, so they're at 160 degrees, which is hot. Everything in here now, if there was any plant diseases or weed seeds, they've all been sterilized at this point. And it's really cool because as we go through the composting process, the temperatures go from this hot thermophilic stage the first 3 months to they start cooling down into mesophilic temperatures and eventually into ambient temperatures. And at each different stage, there's different microorganisms that are the leaders at that stage. And it's just neat to see that they're all really important, but the ones we're just building the whole thing up so that at that final stage, we have exactly what plants and plant roots want. So here we are, hot temps. I'm going to take this with us so we can measure at the next mesophilic stage. And this is, just so you know, this is a 3-foot temperature gauge, helpful to have if you're going to make compost. Not very expensive either. So here we are at the mesophilic stage of composting. What's happened is at the beginning, things got really hot, they've been breaking down. We're 3 months into the process where once a month that first stage of compost has been turned back and forth. You can do this on your own farm with a pitchfork or whatever size tractor you have. We have 5-yard loaders that we use for that. But you can do it at your scale. And you're going to want to turn that pile at least once a month for a minimum of the 3 months. Then we get to this stage where those microorganisms have been working really hard, breaking down all that material. We now have a little bit of a lower carbon to nitrogen ratio than we had in the beginning. And the temperatures are in the mesophilic range. This one's showing it's between 110 and 120. And so it's a different set of bacteria that have now taken over and are digesting at this different carbon to nitrogen ratio here. We're then going to move to our ambient temperature pile, which is cooler, and that's when we're going to screen our compost and then let it sit for 6 months. So we're going to walk through that process as well. And you'll see the scale here. Our piles are probably about 12 feet high. I'm looking, and I'm not sure how long this is, but it's really long. It's a couple 100 feet long. So we make a good amount of compost a year, about 6,000 cubic yards a year. So here we are at the next stage of composting, where the temperatures have gone down to ambient temperature. They're a little warmer than ambient temperature. We're about 6 to 9 months into the process, and everything is really fully broken down at this point. There's still some bigger wood chips and shells that didn't break down during the process, but you can't recognize what was originally in this compost, what it's made from. There's no banana peels or anything like that. And now that the temperatures have decreased, other life forms can come in beyond just bacteria. It's very bacterially dominated in the beginning of the process when it's that hot. But now you can see here, we actually have, this is fungal material, which is, I love seeing in our compost, just another life form that brings a lot to plant roots. This is where we'll start a little bit later on once we let our compost be screened, and then sit for a while, we'll start getting the nematodes and some of those higher life forms which just have amazing benefits to your soil health. Behind us, we're screening today, which is just we have a very large screener. You could really just use some chicken wire on a frame and screen it yourself that way. But we're using this Comtech kind of industrial size screener, very efficient for separating out coarse material from the fine material. There's no bad part of the coarse material. It's fine to have. We just don't like it in our fields. It's hard to plant carrot seeds and little larkspurs and things when there's coarse material in there. Then we're going to head over to our screened pile we're going to plan on now and meet back up with my dad. So here we are at the finished screened pile of compost, where this material has done its whole process. It's been about a year, and then we like to have about 6 months to mature at this stage, so that when it goes into our fields or into your fields, it's just fully broken down.
Totally cured.
Totally cured. Doesn't have any odor. It smells like earth. It smells like geosmin. That's that term for earth smell.
No malodor. Where, yes, it's very pleasant earth-like smell.
And it's black. You'll see the darker the compost, usually the richer it is. It stains your fingers very rapidly. It's full of these great organic compounds. And you definitely can't recognize any of the original, ingredients that went into making this.
Yeah, you don't see an apple core, a tea bag, a banana peel,
It's just nice, rich, dark compost.
Right. One exception that you can see in our case is little tiny bits of shell,
which is a wonderful source of calcium for the compost, but that's not an organic material, so it won't break down.
Right.
But it's nice mineral material to have in there.
And it gives you a neutral pH. So besides not needing to fertilize, you don't need to lime when you use enough compost, quality compost.
In our area, the soils are traditionally very acidic, so it's nice to have that little bit of calcium added in there. And so, just so you know, a good compost has generally a neutral pH.
Right.
And shouldn't have any weed seeds. Those should all be cooked thoroughly through that first thermophilic phase.
And that's really important to sterilize your diseases and weed seeds.
One thing I didn't mention is that it's only about 30 degrees here, very cold January day in Rhode Island, and it doesn't impact the temperatures inside the compost pile. You saw they were still 160 at that phase. They were pretty high today, and then they go down, and now this is.
But the finished compost is ambient, close to ambient temperature.
Yep, which is
the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So this is what you want, just this wonderful, rich, dark goodness to spread respect on your fields.
Yeah, you're spreading a life force. There's billions and billions of microorganisms in that handful of compost. So that's the life force that's going to energize your soil and make your plants very healthy.
And yourselves. Well, thank you so much. We're happy to give you guys this tour.
Thank you for listening and watching. Thank you.